Good afternoon. This is St. Peter's Hove. I'm Father Alexander, and welcome to our 148th step in our walking tour through the Bible. And today I'm going to talk about the most famous psalm of all, Psalm 22 brackets 23, the one we call "The Lord is my shepherd," the most famous psalm. Now, you might think that this psalm has been done to death and that you've heard it so many times. It is, after all, the most famous of psalms. Well, there's a good reason why it's the most famous of psalms, because it's made a huge impression on readers throughout the ages. Now, I'm going to propose a slightly different reading of it. I've thought about it. We've got three things going on in this psalm. First, the Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want, says the psalmist. Fresh and green are the pastures where he gives me repose. Near restful waters he leads me to revive my drooping spirit. He guides me along the right path. He is true to his name. If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear. You are there with your crook and your staff. With these you give me comfort. The psalmist is talking as if he were a sheep. The psalmist, if you like, had a vision of himself as a sheep in the flock of the Lord, being guided by the shepherd who is the Lord. So he's saying, I'm a sheep, you're the shepherd, and this is the relationship between us. Then, this is the third verse, something rather odd happens. You have prepared a banquet for me in the sight of my foes. My head you have anointed with oil, my cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and kindness shall follow me all the days of my life. Suddenly, the psalmist is no longer a sheep. The psalmist is a human being who has been taken into a banquet, the banquet of God, where he's treated like a king and his head is anointed with oil, as a king's is. His cup is overflowing. In other words, there's so much wine to drink it just overflows. But you don't invite sheep to banquets. You certainly don't anoint their heads in oil, do you? So there's a second vision. The first vision he has is, I am the sheep of the Lord is my shepherd. The second vision is, I am the Lord's guest at the Lord's banquet, which is the most superb banquet of all. And it's a banquet prepared in sight of my foes. In other words, this banquet is so good, I'm being rewarded with this wonderful banquet. All the people were horrible to me during my life. They're being punished by being forced to watch me being rewarded. And then the last two lines, which are the key to understanding the whole thing. In the Lord's own house shall I dwell forever and ever. Now, the banquet is not taking place in the Lord's own house. It's in the sight of his foes. They're not in the Lord's house. They'd be expelled from the Lord's house. They wouldn't get into the Lord's house. And the Lord's house is a place of worship, not a place of eating. So the last two lines are the key to the whole thing. In the Lord's own house shall I dwell forever and ever. I shall be in the company of God forever, because the Lord's house is where the Lord is. I shall be in the presence of God forever and ever. These two visions that the poet has had are ways of seeing what it means to be in the presence of the Lord. What does it mean to be in the presence of the Lord? Easy. One, it means you are his sheep, he is your shepherd, he is guiding you all the time, and you are replete. All your needs are catered for. What does it mean to be in the presence of the Lord? It's to be at a banquet which is provided by God in the sight of your foes. When we are invited to pray in the presence of the Lord, to contemplate in the presence of the Lord, to be in the presence of the Lord, it's quite hard then to take the next step and to say what this means. What does it mean for us, the creature, to be in the presence of the Creator? What does it mean to be in front of the Lord? Well, these two visions, which are unconnected, it seems to me, except they're two ways of explaining the same thing. These two visions explain to us what it means to be in the presence of God. God places a banquet in front of us. He proffers to us good things. He feeds us with everything we shall want. He gives us all delightful things. That's the banquet. The sheep shepherd thing, God leads us, he guides us. Again, he provides for us. We don't wander around in deserts or arid scrubland, rather through fresh and green pastures. And he revives our drooping spirits by the waters of a river. He doesn't allow us to be tired. He doesn't allow us to be exhausted or depressed. He guides us along the right path. And even if something awful happens to us, we're not frightened. He gives us a guarantee which stops us being frightened. He's there with his crook and his staff, and with these he gives you comfort. In other words, God gives us limits to our life that keep us safe from all the bad things that we might wander off and do. He stops us wandering off into the desert and dying of thirst. He stops us wandering off or going in no particular direction. He gives direction to our life. He gives sustenance to body and soul. He gives us a place. And the place we have it's a more a state than a physical place. He gives us a state of relationship with God. We are his protected species. And again, we are the people who are at his banquet. We have our place in the world. We are not people who don't know where to turn, people who have no fixed abode. We belong. That's very important. We are at home with the Lord. At least that's what it seems to me to be about this psalm. It's used, as we know, always at funerals, and that's because it does have a reference to death. If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear. That seems to be a reference to death. And of course, the banquet seems to be a reference to heaven, what happens after death. So it can be read as well as I am the Lord's sheep. When I die, the Lord will shepherd me through the gates of death and lead me to eternal life. That's a perfectly legitimate reading of it. But my reading is this. And then, of course, when you die, you will be in the house of the Lord forever and ever. You'll be taking part in the liturgy, not of the temple in Jerusalem, the liturgy of heaven. But to me, this is about a guy sitting in the temple and being in the presence of God in the temple and imagining what this means and seeing it as this shepherd relationship and this banquet phenomenon. Don't forget, we have lots of people in the Bible, well, a few, who lived in the temple. One was the boy Samuel, who lived at Shiloh, the holy place at Shiloh, before the temple was built. Another was Anna, the daughter of Phanuel, in the Gospel of St. Luke, who never left the temple, but lived there night and day. What was she doing all the time? Well, she was making herself useful and talking to people, I suppose, but at the same time, she was the shepherd, being shepherded by the Lord. She was praying the psalm, perhaps, and she was thinking, in the Lord's own house shall I dwell forever and ever. The Lord's own house was so good that she didn't need to go anywhere else. And we too, if we really believe in God, we don't need to go anywhere else because the Lord's house is so good. The Lord is my shepherd. There is nothing I shall want. There's nothing I shall lack. I've got everything I need because the Lord is the one looking after me. Okay, hope that helps. So that was Psalm 22. All the very best. Bye.